Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Why Do I Care? I'm your host, Toby Favalora.
And I'm Alex Trevette.
And today we'll be discussing Hunter Biden being pardoned by his father. So without further ado, let's get right to it.
Today I signed a pardon for my son Hunter. From the day I took office, I said I would not interfere with the DOJ's decision making, and I kept my word, even as I have watched my son being selectively and unfairly prosecuted. Without aggregating factors like use in a crime, multiple purchases, or buying a weapon as a straw purchaser, people are almost never brought to trial on felony charges solely for how they filled out a gun form. Those who were late paying their taxes because of serious addictions, but paid them back subsequently with interest and penalties, are typically given non-criminal resolutions. It is clear that Hunter was treated differently. That was President Joe Biden's statement on the pardoning of his son, Hunter Biden.
Yeah, so just some facts on this case. His son, Hunter Biden, who had been in the news since, I would say, before, 2018, right? Because that's what Trump was impeached for, was trying to figure out what was happening with Hunter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, his first original impeachment. Yeah.
So he's been in the news for a while. Frankly, not sure why. He doesn't really do much. He doesn't have much power, honestly. He's not, in the, it's not like the Trump White House where it's, filled with staffers that are, all related to him. But they've just been kind of obsessed with Hunter. Mm-hmm. So what happened is he pled guilty to these 9 federal tax charges in L.A., for basically just falsifying these records and for failing to file returns, during that period he was just hooked on drugs.
Yeah, he also pled guilty to a handful of gun charges, and what he did is kind of a interesting thing. It's called an open plea, so there was essentially no deal with the prosecutors that he would get any kind of plea deal, which is kind of unusual for anyone who would plead guilty to a crime, which makes me think he might have known a pardon could be coming. But he was gonna face at 17 years in prison, which is a lot of time for a crime of this magnitude. Likely only would have served about 36 months, but...
Yeah, so this all basically kind of goes around to, when we talk about how the American justice system is set up, there's a lot of things that don't usually happen, mm-hmm. right? Most of the time, things don't go to trial. I'm pretty sure that 96% of all cases don't end up going to trial. Because why? It's just a lot of work. No one wants to go to trial. That's why they, mm-hmm. within legal systems, in courtrooms, they have this type of workplace system where they just try to get plea deals done. They try to make compromises because the judge doesn't want to have an inefficient courtroom. The prosecution doesn't want to have to do all the research, and the defense, a plea's a plea. That's kind of you get off happy. So when we talk about facing 17 years, but likely was only going to serve 36 months, that's true for everybody, because that's just kind of how our system works. People rarely get the maximum sentence with everything that they're charged on. They usually do these plea deals and all this stuff to try to get it down. That being said, a lot of people don't know that. So when you look and you say Hunter, the president's son was going to get 17 years, but he's only going to do 3 of them. What the heck? That's the reaction that some people would have. But that's this is just a very normal thing that would happen to a lot of people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that being said, regardless of where that all kind of stands on what he would have got, what would have happened, Biden pardoned him.
Yeah.
So basically just saying that, you can't, he's not going to be prosecuted for the tax and gun convictions, which is big for a couple reasons. First of all, it's because it's his son. But most importantly, it's because he repeatedly said that he would not do that. Mm-hmm. And Trump has repeatedly said that Biden is trying to weaponize the DOJ. And
that's an ironic one.
Yeah, it is. But for a casual observer, if one person says, "Oh, they're using the DOJ for personal things," and then they pardon their own son, that's kind of
Yeah, I understand that, but I feel especially with kind of our attention span as the American populace, everyone's going to forget about this by, next Tuesday. And we're all going to move on to whatever other craziness is happening. And I feel a lot has been made, and we'll get to this too, about kind of how is this going to impact Biden's legacy, when really I don't think this will even really come up when we're talking about Joe Biden's legacy.
Yeah, part of me agrees, but part of me disagrees because Biden's legacy is one that I have no idea what's going to happen. Frankly, me personally, like what he is kind of, it's a tale of two presidencies. The first 2 years, he was so successful. He got so many things done legislatively. He was able to lead the U.S. out of COVID, lead us through a tough economy, and all these things. But the second two, that's when he really started to see his kind of cognitive decline. Democrats were always going to blame him for Kamala losing, but she was never going to win that race. There's no chance that she was going to win. Even if Biden never said that he was going to run again, there's no way that was going to be run. She was never going to win. So I think that's kind of something that you can't really hold against him. But Biden's legacy is one that I have no idea how people are going to think of him.
Well, I mean, I feel like he was almost doing like LBJ speed run.
Oh yeah, dude, he was on fire.
Well, I mean, it was like, you know, a lot of he made, you know, really good policies, again, as you said, first half, but, you know, like he shot himself in the foot over Gaza and over not dropping out of, you know, the presidential race. And so I disagree with you there. I think that give the Democrats 2 years to run a primary, let everyone actually campaign and introduce themselves to the voters, and be able to, I think this is the most important part, run away from Joe Biden.
Mm-hmm.
And they could have won that election because right, when you look at it, it was an 150,000 vote margin in the, you know, blue wall, or what was the blue wall, right? And so like when you have margins that are that slim, really, you know, any candidate with maybe 200 more days of being a real candidate who's actually running for office, who people know, maybe they could have pulled that one out.
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from. I said that with the kind of caveat that we would assume that Harris would win, and she would still not run away from Biden, because she just kind of refused to. I don't know if you saw, this is kind of getting besides the point, but she chose not to because she was proud of what they had done. So with that in mind, I don't really think it would have kind of happened. So circling back to Biden's legacy, something that's important about this pardon is that usually controversial pardons happen like on the way out. Yeah. You know, like, oh, Trump's, you know, getting sworn in at noon, let me quickly at 10 write some pardons, you know? That's kind of what we expected that's what I expected for something like this. And I think the reason that he did it so early is because he was afraid of what Trump is going to do. And Trump is starting to get power. And this is kind of the change. Like, that's kind of what I feel. I feel that he thinks that Trump is really going to go after Hunter, which he probably is, and probably would. And I think for some reason Biden felt like now he had to do it instead of waiting like a month or two, which I don't.
Yeah, I mean, I think end of the day we have to remember that Joe Biden's an 82-year-old man whose days are at this point numbered, right? They are finite, and I think not even from like kind of political perspective, but from a family perspective, I think he might just want another month or two with his son, right? Yeah. To not have him constantly fighting a court case after his, you know, life was destroyed by drugs, right? You know, to be able to just spend kind of those last fleeting moments together as father and son, especially as a father who lost his other son, Beau Biden, in 2016. I feel like that is a much bigger factor than really anything politically that people will really talk about in this situation.
That was sad.
Yeah, it was somber.
That was very sad.
Yeah.
I will say about Biden, I think he is the most family-oriented president, celebrity, person that I can name. Like, everything he does is because of his family, for his family. He's had an immense amount of tragedy. His first wife died. His daughter died in that crash?
I think so, yeah.
He was a single father. He got married. His son tragically died to cancer. And then his other son has been addicted to drugs. Like, he has gone through so much. And he's still been so dedicated to this country. Part of me is just like, you know what? Whatever, Joe. Like, you deserve it. Pardon your son.
Well, I think that it's, again, I think it's really a non-issue for a lot of people when you get down to brass tacks. Like, as we saw, this election, one thing mattered for the American people, the economy.
Yeah,
right?
people don't care. The only people that are talking about this are people who've already made up their minds on anything political. Like, I don't... This happens so much. It's like people get all worried and screwed over about something, and then the average person's like, who's Hunter Biden?
Exactly.
What laptop? You know, like...
Yeah, no, I think if you showed Americans a picture of Hunter Biden, 30 to 40% might know who they're looking at.
30 to 40?
I say that just because of kind of the Fox News media machine that has been plastering pictures of Hunter Biden kind of all over their network over the last months, really, trying to make, a mountain out of a molehill. But again, like, I mean, as we've said, I just think it's not that huge of an issue for the American people.
Yeah, I agree. However, some people in the political circle are really getting upset about that. For example, the Colorado governor, Jared Polis, who I will say is, people want him to run for president in 2028. That is something that's happening. And he was very quick to say, Biden, dude, you shouldn't have done that.
Yeah, I don't know. Polis was a dude who I was kind of bullish on like November 6th when we were walking out of it, and I was like, where are we going next? I'm like, maybe Jared Polis, Colorado,
Something like that,
he's got a little bit of like that Western appeal.
Like a Tim Walz type of...
In a way, yeah. I think he'd play well in the Midwest, and then he goes out and he writes an 1,000-word tweet on why RFK should be the HHS secretary, and then he goes and he does something like this, where he's talking about setting a bad precedent, even though Donald Trump has fully committed to using the legal system to punish his political opponents, right? And so that's when I'm like, why are you even talking about this? Why are you not talking about Donald Trump, being, like setting a bad precedent? I don't think really matters when really, in reality, the whole legal system's about to go to shit in about 2 months.
Yeah, and I agree, but also, like, personally, I'm conflicted. Because part of me is like, yeah, you should not pardon your son or pardon friends for personal gain. Point blank, nobody should do it. However, Trump's doing it. It doesn't really matter. Like, here's the thing. It's like, you should not pardon your friends, pardon your family. You should not do that. You should also not use the DOJ to go against political opponents, which is what Trump will do to Hunter Biden, which is why I'm conflicted. Because it's like, like if we take the high road, they're going to go so low and like chop our legs off. But by doing this, like we are now seen as equals with them. And it's just like the whole thing is now, it's like this both sides. It's like, both sides are equally bad. Biden pardoned his son, one of his last living, like after a whole life of tragedy, and Trump tried to overthrow the fucking government, so they must be equal now. That's what gets to me.
Yeah, so I think that it's a perception that is never going to change, just because of how rooted, they go low, we go high, became really during the Obama administration and during Hillary's campaign, that the American populace can't get it out of their head, and the media especially cannot get it out of their head that the Democratic Party has to be perfect. It has to be an absolutely well-oiled machine that cannot make one misstep ever, or else they will be uniquely punished for it, right? And we saw it in the last election. That is what constantly happened. And like you said, Trump is right now, not only he's not issuing pardons for his friends, he's giving them jobs in the government.
Yeah, he pardons his son-in-law's father?
Yeah.
And then appointed him to be ambassador to France? France, by the way, I kind of want an ambassador over there that knows what they're doing with this whole call of no confidence thing. But that's besides the point. But just like part of me kind of understands why like news outlets report like that, because if they don't, they'd be labeled as biased. Like, you do all this stuff, but you don't point out this. But also, it's like, at a certain point, it's hard because I believe that as Americans and as people in government, we should always take the high route, point blank. However, you're like, if you do that, like you're going to basically be politically punished. And because of that, it's now you're incentivized not to do that. And because of that, like if you take the high route, you're going to be politically hurt, and then somebody who is always going to take the low route is going to win over you. And it's okay, would I rather somebody who actually kind of like believes about these things but sometimes slips up, or would I rather, you know what I mean? It's like, it's hard because we want to hold our elected officials to a higher standard. But by doing that, and by holding all elected officials to the same standard, we harm ourselves.
Well, and I think if we held every elected official to the same standard, we wouldn't really be talking about this right now, right? Just because it would have seemed so far out of left field, but we also would be in a completely different political climate.
Yeah.
If every single elected official was held to the standard they should be held to, but they're not, right? And for me, that's the reality that we have to live with. And so when people talk about, going high, going low, like what path to take. I'm like, let's take the good path, right? Let's not worry about kind of how are people going to like perceive this minute action. Let's make people's lives a little bit better, right? I think that has to be your goal of governance. And I feel like for me, at least it has to be what the Democratic Party needs to focus on. It's something you've seen Bernie Sanders kind of do. I think he put out a few tweets about actually praising Elon Musk and Doge for what they've said about healthcare reform, which is just, I'm just like, it's not
theory, but
but I'm like, that is, I feel like, kind of the model the Democrats need to do, or at least some people need to do, say we need progress however we can get it, and if we fundamentally improve people's lives, then we are doing our job as government officials.
Yeah, we're getting to a point where, like, I know it's never going to happen, but part of me feels like there's going to be this party splits. I know it's not going to happen, but the way I look at it is it feels like we're going to have, on the right, we're going to have people on the right who want to pass as much legislation as possible, people on the right who are just typical conservatives, people on the left who are typical Democrats, and people on the left who want to pass as much as possible. You know what I mean? And I don't think they're going to split, but it feels like the divide is getting so big between the parties, we're never going to actually get anything done. And we talk about polarization, and we talk about how Americans just kind of don't really trust their government because nothing gets passed. And we look at something like this, which it's taking the energy and the time out of what should be spent other places. Like, part of me is like, why do we bother doing this for the podcast episode?
Yeah.
But also it's important, and I think we should talk about it. But it's important to a certain amount of people. You know?
Yeah, and I think, Toby, the way, I mean, like, it didn't really matter here, but the way like you and I often reflect on this is that these conversations that we have are pathways into larger ones. We started today talking about Hunter Biden's pardon, and now we're talking about the wider dynamics of the American political system, right? So it's about, I think this is also a larger thing with political communication, but finding messages and events that are going to stick with people. I don't think this pardon is one that's going to do it, but finding those smaller niche things that make it easier to talk about the big ideas. You know, what is the small thing that lets me help somebody else fundamentally understand what party fragmentation is, right? What is the small thing that helps, somebody else actually understand what the Fed does, right?
Yes.
And I think that's what we're missing in political communication, at least in the Democratic side, because Republicans are so good at that. They take this small little issue and they horseshoe it in with this other one, and they make it all about their issue. And then they win on that issue message, right? Think about, I think, one that was more successful than any of us could have predicted, but the talk about immigrants in Springfield, Ohio, right? When you think about that extremely niche lie, right? It was bald-faced lie that they used to then horseshoe in the rest of the immigration messaging, and then they won off of it, right? Like that's what I think the Democratic Party needs to learn how to do. They need to learn how to take small issues and make them bigger.
Yeah, I completely, like what you said with that example, like it was one person who ate a cat. One person. And that became such a big thing with immigration. And that's what they're so good at. Another example would be like trans issues. Like how they ran this trans ad all across saying like, oh, they're going to use your government money to spend on like illegal aliens in prison who want to change their gender. Like, they're so good at connecting everything. And this, when we talk about these things, it makes me feel for two things. First and foremost, everyone's like, oh, we need liberal media, liberal media, liberal media. Sure, but I think that in general, America needs one news network that they all trust. And I know that's not really going to happen. But we need like a, I forgot his name. There's, whatever, like some TV guy, David Wallace. No, not David Wallace. I forgot his name. In like the 60s, he was the big TV guy. Everyone trusted him.
Walter Cronkite.
Walter Cronkite, there you go.
I played him in a Mall UN conference once.
Really? He was the voice of Benjamin Franklin on Liberty Skids. Yeah, more you know. Yeah, but just like a unified thing. And a little quick story for you. So, I was involved in Massachusetts Boys State. It's something that I did it for a year, and then I did it like as a counselor.
Yeah.
And as I was counseling, so basically what Boys State is it's just like, think about it as just like mock election. So people, this was for like the governor of Massachusetts, this mock election. And this guy, the answer for everything, he would say education. Like, oh, we have this issue with this. Well, education, we need to teach people about this. And that's what I'm thinking about now. It's just like we need education on issues. Like, when in the election, like Kamala Harris didn't cause inflation, first and foremost. She was vice president, and we can't really tie inflation necessarily to Sean Biden. It happened everywhere in the world. What happens within like the political system that makes a pardon like this so surprising? Global warming, like all these things. I think that we need to focus on education as opposed to persuasion.
Yeah, I mean, I think I said maybe last episode, a couple episodes ago, if every American was required to take an intro to economics class, Kamala Harris would have won the election. Right, point blank, because that's just like based on.
If everyone took it and passed.
Yeah, sure, yeah, but like, I think even if they sat there and listened to it for a little bit, but I think that's the issue, that a lot of America doesn't really want to listen right now. And you talked about wanting kind of a trusted person that everyone could turn to, and I feel like we kind of almost can't even have that because the American monoculture is really starting to dissolve, right? Like you think about the biggest TV events of all time, the moon landing, Nixon and Kennedy's debate, right? Even like now, like the Super Bowl, right? These are events that people come together to watch, but I would dare say that the Super Bowl now is far less popular than the Super Bowl was 20 years ago. That America, through I think mainly the internet, everyone has kind of become absorbed in their own niches, their own echo chambers, which I think it's good to do the things you like to do, right? But we're also missing kind of this overarching American like messaging and just American media culture that we've always had. It's just like it's always been about, in the 60s and the 70s. Hello to the wall tile for those watching us on YouTube. It was always about like, oh yeah, you get 3 news channels, right? And they're all gonna say the same thing. You're gonna listen to 3 news channels, and they're all gonna be reputable, right? But now most people don't watch the news. Most people don't read the news.
And if you do, it's just like the fact that you're like, oh, what news sources you get it from? That's not trustworthy.
Exactly, yeah.
It's like, God, like, how do we get to this point? Like, how did we as a country get to the point where we are not arguing over issues, we're arguing over facts? Anyways, back to Biden and back to the pardon. We're going to talk a little bit more about his legacy because I think that's probably the most important thing. Is how is he going to be remembered? Because he has nothing left politically. Like when I was asked, I was like, why would he do that? It's like, what does he have to lose?
Yeah,
he has nothing to lose. His career's over. Like he's not going to run, dude. He might write a book, maybe. He might do some speeches, maybe. But I think he's just going to chill at home with Jill and like his grandkids. Like his career's over. He has nothing to lose. But when I say that and I reflect over his career, it is hard to find somebody who had dedicated so much to this country but received so little back. Like, he is the definition of a public servant. He was in the Senate for, how many years? 46, I want to say?
Yeah.
A little bit, like around that. He was vice president of the United States. He was going to run for president, but he didn't because his son tragically died. He was done with politics.
Yeah.
But then after Charlottesville and what Trump said, the good people on both sides, he said, I need to get involved. I need to do something. He left retirement to run and beat Trump, and he beat Trump. And the people that he trusted and the people that he thought were on his side and his friends essentially backstabbed him and made him step out of the race. And he still did that. And I feel like he's given so much to this country, and he's done so much. He's such a dedicated servant, and he's really, I don't want to say, he's tried his best. He's given it his all, very clearly. This presidency messed him up mentally. Like, he's given it all, and if this is what defines his legacy, I don't know what to say.
Yeah, the reality is that his legacy is not one that is overtly good, right? You look at the 1994 crime bill, right? You look at at least for me, like Gaza and what's gone on there, you know, his tact on foreign policy when he's been president. And for me, you look at the fact that he didn't drop out of the presidential race at 82 years old until it was, you know, too late. But again, like as you said, he has been a dedicated public servant for so long.
He did a lot, like the violence against women, chips, like
Yeah.
American, like all these things. Like he did very good things. Like obviously, like I'm not saying that he shouldn't have been more proactive on Gaza or like the crime, like or anything like that. Like I agree, but that's kind of my point.
Yeah.
Is that he's done so much for this country, but people are only going to focus on what he didn't do or what he did wrong.
And I think that is just kind of a symptom of being president, Toby. I think that when you look back at presidential kind of legacies, right? Presidents are only going to get remembered in a good light if they did something that was extraordinary in the minds of the American people. You know, George Washington as the first example, right?
Abe Lincoln,
because he did something extraordinary.
FDR, JFK, and those are maybe the four that I really think have cemented their legacy. JFK in part because I think the timing and how tragically. Sorry, I interrupted, but I'm just saying, like very, very limited amount of presidents really do.
Yeah, and I was going to go to FDR too, because the reality is that FDR had one of the more abhorrent civil liberties violations in our country's history, right? With the Japanese internment camps, yet he is still remembered as this almost like, you know, godlike figure for a lot of Americans, especially older Americans.
Yes.
Who have now passed on since then. But the people who were alive then in the 30s and the 40s, who really, you know, benefited from a lot of what he did, like they hung pictures of FDR in their house, right? Like I think, you know, some of my friends have told me like stories of their grandparents having photos of FDR hung up on their walls because he was just that kind of figure. And so I think when we're talking about presidential legacy, you have to do something that is truly and deeply extraordinary to really get remembered as kind of that trailblazing visionary.
And to build off of that, LBJ is not remembered as one like that unless you're kind of like in this, you know? Like how many people could really name what LBJ did? Or if I say LBJ, how many people say LeBron James instead of Lyndon B. Johnson? You know what I mean? It's like, and these are the things, and I understand it's hard. And I guess my point is just like, I think that as a country we should thank him for all that he's done because he gave it his all. Like he gave it his all, and he's a good man with good intentions. And I feel like he's villainized because of his age, because of some decisions. But he is a good person. He's a good man who has good intents and good beliefs and good values. And that's what this pardon boils down to. He is a family man. It's his family. Politics aside, your family is your family.
Yeah.
Do I think that in other situations, like I think in general, pardoning your family is not the best precedent to kind of set. But for a family that's gone through so much, and for a son who's gone through so much, and has come out on the other side of it, but just continued to be blasted by this, and somehow not gone back to his drug use is amazing to me, frankly. I think that what this all boils down to is this is who Joe Biden is, and this is who he always was going to be.
Yeah.
Any last notes?
Well, I think we still have to do why do I care, Toby?
Oh, we do have to do. That's a great point. So, Alex, why do you care about this pardon?
Toby, I care about this pardon because it says something about where we're at politically.
Yes.
It says to me two things, right? That on one hand, this was only possible because of all the stuff that we've talked about, Joe Biden being a family man and putting his family first, and just the fact that Democrats have nothing to lose at this point. It's beyond Biden. We are currently locked out of power.
Yes.
In you know, like both chambers of Congress, in the presidency, and in the courts. Democrats have nothing to lose in terms of political capital at all. And so, like, this doesn't really move the needle for anyone, right? And I think that it's also a reminder that things are going to get a lot worse very soon. I think we should care because people care about this right now. And that says something, that there are people out there who are willing to stand up and give their opinions about a single individual pardon. I think when we look back in 4 years and Trump, or potentially Vance at this point, because I don't know he makes it, but a insane, crazy, demonic Republican president issuing pardons around this time, and we're gonna be like, God, remember when Biden pardoned his son? Wasn't that so cool? Wasn't that so chill? When Donald Trump or J.D. Vance are pardoning the worst people in corporate America, and some of the most evil people in the United States, right? I think that is gonna kind of be our takeaway. That in 4 years we're not really gonna care.
I agree, and I would say that the reason that you should care about this is because I guarantee Trump is going to use this as an excuse to pardon January 6th.
Yeah.
He said that. It's like, oh, he pardoned his son. I'm going to party some people taking a peaceful tour of the Capitol. So I think the reason they should care about this pardon is because it shows you so much about America and the current political system that we are in. Because one person is actively trying to use the DOJ to go after political opponents. One person insinuate an attack on our capital, wants to take away rights to women, wants to deport people, wants to ruin the economy for some reason, wants to make Canada a state, which is ugh. And then on the other side, there's somebody who pardoned his son and dropped out a little bit late. But that's and they're kind of treated as equals.
Yeah.
Which is what's crazy to me. So that's why you should care, is because this is so perfect to understand the American current political state. If you just follow the issue and how people talk about it and what happens, you would understand everything you need to know. Republicans are very unified about it. Democrats are fractured about it. The media is going to side with this whole both sidesism and is going to ignore what Trump's actually doing, and this is going to cover the news, and it's not going to talk about how Trump's appointing crazy people to run the government. So that's why you should care. Thank you all so much for listening. As always, go to whydoicarepod.com. You can find episode transcripts, links to all of our social medias, and you can also check us out on YouTube. So thanks for listening, and have a great rest of your day.